Ah, the wonder of flight. Winged races have long been a staple of the fantasy genre. Whether it's the leathery wings of a tiefling or the avian wings of an aarakocra, flying characters appeal to no small number of players, and it's easy to ascertain as to why. However, many DMs can tell you of the other, more depressing side of flying races, which is trying to design stories that don't crumble to pieces with such races in play. You see, the issue with a flying race is they are always able to fly, and there's not many things a DM can do short of crippling the character in order to stop them. Not to mention the dreaded Aarakocra monk with its absurd speed totals. So, what is the big deal with racial flight exactly, and is there any way to fix it that's both fun and fair for the players? As alluded to previously, part of the main issue with racial fly speeds lies within simply how insurmountable such a creature can feel in certain situations. Having to contend with a creature who is able to fight in 3 dimensions is a horror story shared by DMs and barbarian mains alike. As coming to the realization that your melee-focused monster or player character is completely inconsequential in the face of a flying creature that can make range attacks can be a rather unpleasant experience. Over my years as a DM, I've both seen and tried many different methods in order to balance racial fly speeds, and in this video, I'm going to impart onto you the best way I've found in order to deal with a player capable of flying at literally any moment they choose. But before I explain what exactly my rules for racial flight are, let's first attempt to break down the issues with these speeds into their fundamentals and understand exactly why they cause the problems they do. The first thing we should look at is what abilities a player could normally acquire and use in order to achieve flight, and how those abilities are balanced in regards to the classes that get them and the level that they're available at. The first most common example is the Fly spell, available to sorcerers, wizards, and warlocks at level 5, and artificers at level 9. This spell grants one creature a fly speed of 60 feet, which lasts for 10 minutes, requires concentration, needs your action to activate, and costs a 3rd level spell slot, or bigger slots if you want to target more than one creature. Based on this information alone, any race getting a permanent fly speed at 1st level is already starting to look a bit ridiculous, but let's keep having a look at other examples. Looking for things earlier than 5th level, there is the Levitate spell. Although this does not offer a lot of the freedoms a proper fly speed has, it can still grant a character complete immunity to attacks made by melee-oriented creatures. The spell is similar to Fly in that it lasts 10 minutes with concentration and also requires an action to activate. The last thing we can look to in terms of low-level spells is Featherfall, a 1st level reaction spell that can negate fall damage as having a fly speed would. Getting more into class features now, the Druid's Wild Shape can be used to turn into a flying creature after reaching 8th level, which while is capable of lasting much longer than the Fly spell, and without the need for concentration, still requires an action to use and forces you to give up most if not all of your own features depending on what you turn into. Still a hefty price to pay for the gift of flight. In fact, it's arguable that the closest thing to racial flight that can be achieved by your average class is only given to a handful of sorcerer subclasses at 14th level, wherein they are given wings deployable with a bonus action and that typically have a 30-foot fly speed. I say it again, 14th level for unlimited free flight with your own body and stats. That paints a very poor picture for racial flight, especially the Aarakocra with a whopping 50-foot fly speed from 1st level. It's also worth mentioning that there are some new subclasses in Tarshish that grant flight speeds, as well as some races from the setting guides like Beyond the Witchlight and Strixhaven that do as well. And since what I'm explaining today will be my own personal method of fixing flight, I'd rather just leave those sources aside. Now, some of the common defenses made by players for the Aarakocra is that they essentially get no racial features in exchange for their fly speed. And also that there are many ways to counter their fly speeds with spells and range attack focused monsters. Unfortunately, this argument doesn't really hold water for me, and let me tell you why. While racial benefits can sometimes be very impactful on the way a character plays, the design intention of a race is to give more complementary abilities that your class can build off of, not be defining in how you play the character as a whole. Your race is meant to serve more purpose in roleplay and how it feels during combat, as opposed to defining outright how your character is run and built. Not to mention, if, as the defenders of Aarakocra say, every encounter features an enemy that can disable or hinder the Aarakocra player's flight advantage, the same players may pull a 180 and flip out, claiming that they're being targeted or punished for their race. Even if the Aarakocra essentially gets no features and can easily be countered, it still doesn't leave the DM with a lot of ability to actively build their world and story with flight in mind, because if every single problem features a way to prevent flight from solving it instantly, then the Aarakocra player will effectively have no racial traits at all, and will end up feeling segregated. Alright, I've rambled for a while about some of the issues that racial flight causes and some of the excuses players make for it. But what about an actual solution? The good news is I have one. The bad news is there isn't really a good solution that preserves the allure of having a racial fly speed to begin with. This is because balance doesn't always mean feels good to use, but nevertheless, here's my fix for the issue with racial flight. At first level, the character is able to glide, falling safely 30 feet per round while they are not incapacitated, and they have a flying speed equal to half their normal fly speed. For example, the winged tiefling gets 30 feet normally, so they would start with 15 feet. Armor restrictions apply as normal, so the Aarakocra still can't use medium or heavy armor if they want to fly. Until the character reaches 5th level, meaning before that level, they will fall at the end of each of their turns if nothing else holds them aloft, and they cannot fly upwards on a turn without first touching the ground. The closest comparison I can draw to this is the Eagle Totem Barbarian's 14th level feature, although that feature can still be used to fly vertically after falling and starting the next turn, whereas this one only lets you move at effective 90-degree angles. This is how it works mechanically, but it can easily be flavored that the character is gliding downwards at a smoother angle. And finally, after reaching 11th level, their flying speed increases to its normal amount, so 50 for the Aarakocra and 30 for the winged tiefling. So, let's now proceed to break down why I chose the level differentials I did and how this affects the game. By halving their normal fly speed from the beginning and making them fall at the end of their turn, this ensures that they cannot remain in the safety of the sky after the end of their turn, and that they cannot scale towers or chasms longer than 15 or 25 feet, and this further serves to dissuade them from using the fly speed as a crutch. As to why I have these restrictions lift at 5th and 11th level specifically, I chose these numbers based on what I thought would be the most fun for the game. If we were to talk about pure balance, you could argue that the restrictions should be lifted at 8th and 14th level chronologically, as that would be better reflective of the standards set by other more common types of flight gained by classes. But should you decide to use these rules at your table, the DM has the liberty to decide when they want either restriction to lift. So that's how I fix racial flight, but that doesn't solve every problem we have to deal with. Moving on to the second part of the video, the next unsolved problem we need to address is, what happens to the Aarakocra under these rules? Unlike Variant Tiefling, the Aarakocra gets no other significant racial traits to balance out with this change. So here are some racial traits that I created for them, based on previous editions of the game and older lore. The first thing I did was I gave them a -1 to their constitution score, as even by gating their racial flight until 5th level, having a character with normal amounts of health being able to fly uncontested is rather strong at any level of play. Historically, Aarakocra had a -2 to strength and a detrimental trait for claustrophobia, so it's possible you could give them these instead as the price they pay for their racial flight, but I prefer the constitution penalty because it makes them squishier in exchange for their ability to negate melee damage. Moving on to actual benefits though, the first thing I gave them was racial proficiency with perception. You know, eagle eyes see gooder and stuff. Next, I gave them a dive attack, allowing them to deal an extra 1d6 of damage if they manage to fly downwards 20 feet straight towards an enemy and hit with a melee attack. This is another way I thought to solve the issue of the player staying in the air and using ranged attacks to shoot at their foes, in order to encourage getting up close and using melee. It scales over time to deal an additional damage dice at 9th and 17th level. The final racial trait I have given them harkens back to a yonder time of D&D, when the Aarakocra had a special racial weapon, the Flight Lance. Aarakocra Weaponcraft gives them proficiency with this special thrown weapon, as well as javelins, and gives them the ability to craft some over a short rest to ensure that they always have some handy. The Flight Lance deals 1d8 piercing and has a thrown range of 60 to 120. Before we close out the video, I will also include a brief summary of my house rules for natural weapons, as it affects the Aarakocra's talons. Due to issues like the Monk's Flurry of Blows, all natural weapons are considered to be simple weapons at my table, but I also buff them slightly, giving them larger damage dice, weapon properties, or special mechanics like the unarmed fighting style. For the Aarakocra's talons, I bump them up to a d6 and slap on the finesse property. And that is essentially how I fix the issue of racial flight in my own games. Since I intend for all of my videos to be the start of a conversation, let me know what you think of these house rules. If you have a different solution that you use in your games, I'd be interested to hear that too. Is monk the reason we can't have nice things? Are you interested in knowing more about my house rules for natural weapons? Was Tasha's and its new design philosophy the worst thing to happen to 5e D&D? Let me know in the comments, and then hit like and subscribe while you're down there. It'll make my day and show me that there's interest for these videos. But for now, we've reached the end of the video, so I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I hope you all have a lovely day, and may the dice be ever in your favor.